Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Elisa, and we are continuing on with the urinary system. And this time we're going to look at the macro scale gross anatomy of the kidney. So, basically, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that you can describe where they are and what they look like. I want you to know a little bit about the external and the internal features of the kidneys. We'll take a look at the blood flow through the kidney, and we're going to trace the flow of fluid through the renal tubes, and we're going to describe the nerve supply of the kidney. And we're going to do that over the course of a couple videos. But just, in case you're wondering what we're going into, it's just like there's some complexity here. Okay, so things to know. Position, weight, and size. So if you think about, your kidneys basically sit at the back or the posterior abdominal wall, right at like kind of the bottom of your rib cage, right? Bottom of the rib cage, and like at the top part of your lumbars, right? So here's your L's, L, 2, 3, and so all that, and then here's your thoracic, like here's your last ones, like 12 down, and so the kidneys are going to be like kind of asymmetrically-ish located here and here, right? So kind of like in the rib cage bottom. The right kidney is a little bit lower because the liver is huge and it's taking up that space, so it's pushing the kidney down. And so that's that. Rib 12 crosses the middle of the left kidney, so that's kind of helpful. Retroperineal along the ureters, urinary bladder, renal artery, and vein and adrenal gland. So like that means everything's gonna kind of be along the back end, and it starts moving forward. So if like, here's like the thoraco-abdominal region, right? So kidney, you would think ureter, bladder, if that makes sense. So it kind of like leans in. Blad, ureter, and then kidney, right? That's essentially like here's, you know, anterior, and this is like posterior, right? So that hopefully that kind of gives you a ballpark idea. Here's a slice that's much prettier than my drawing, essentially. So here is, right here is the spine. Boop, there's your spine right here. And then here's like a cross section of the kidney. You can also see there's some pretty major vessels we're going to look at, which is the renal artery, the renal vein. So yeah, we'll talk about those. They're about the size of a bar of bath soap in most people. Smaller if you're smaller, larger if you're larger. You know how it goes. The lateral surface is so the hilum is over here. So the hilum is kind of like this entry point where you're coming into the kidney from the medial aspect. And so the medial aspect is also going to be able to bring you things like the blood supplies, like renal artery, and also, the renal vein. Also, what you're going to see is like outflow tracts, right? So things like the ureters are going to come out through here. And let's see here, what else we have. Right, we'll get into how it subdivides out in just a little bit. So let's just kind of start here. Okay, so the hilum is going to have your nerves, your blood vessels, and the lymphatics to some extent, and then definitely the ureter. So like, some of these big ones right here were the ones we were looking at. These are the ones that you'll have to pick out like on the test, for example. Like those are just right out there. Three protective connective tissue coverings are going to be renal fascia. So that's going to be deep to the parietal peritoneum, and it actually holds on to the abdominal wall. So it kind of like duct tapes itself on there, right? And so the perineal fat corpuscle is going to, theoretically, it cushions the kidney, it protects it, it helps hold it in place, but it's also possibly like a quick supply for energy, like in an emergency situation, starvation conditions, theoretically. The fibrous capsule itself, it's like, so if you think about how these organs are structured, a lot of these filtering type organs, so this is pretty gushy stuff in here, right? There's just not a lot of structure. And so it's like on this outside, there's like this layer, right? And so that's like nice and fibrous. And so it encloses the kidney, it protects it from getting damaged, but it also keeps the shape, which is really important. And it also manages things like infection. So if you have a kidney that's infected, for example, and you maybe abscess or have something pretty traumatic happening, it kind of it makes it's basically like a wall that makes it really hard for that infection to kind of traverse. So that's something to think about. Righto. Okay, here it is, all drawn up really big. Yep. Okay. So we're gonna look at some of these. Let me see if I can get. Let's grab another pen color. Okay, so the cortex of the kidney, it's I want you to think of, you know how like in the brain it was really just the outside part, like the gray matter area. So that's what I want you to think of for renal cortex, right? It's just this outside area, and we'll look at this a little bit further on. And I want you to also think nephron city, okay? And then the next thing is kind of interesting. So the medulla, it means like the middle part of something, right? So this is medulla here. But in particular, let's talk about, gosh, what are any other colors? Um, the pyramids of the medulla. So you might kind of see that there's these like condensed, like darkened areas, and they're kind of like pyramid-ish shape. Okay, I think I skipped one. There it is. Okay, it's over here. Okay, it doesn't look like a pyramid. It is a pyramid. Okay, and they're kind of pyramid shaped. Okay, so these are the renal pyramids of the medulla, and these are going to be really important when we talk about things like, again, the nephron, which is like the small, like most functional unit of like the kidney. So that's the pyramid of it. The calyces, minor and major, are collection ducts. So the nephrons are going to produce, hey, I know it. Okay, I'm gonna highlight. Okay, are going to be in these areas right here. You can almost see they're like glassy-ish, right? Okay, so the minor ones are like the smaller ones, and the major ones are just like the larger beds of these areas. And so what they do, the calyces, is they're going to collect like urine as it starts to kind of be dripping down out of the nephron as it's filtered out. So that's what that's doing. Renal column in here is just, let me see here. It's just the component, like the wall between the renal pyramids, really. So that's all that really means. So I hope that's helpful explanation. Okay. Renal artery, renal vein. Let's see what we got. Oops. Any chance I can change these colors? No, there is no chance. Okay. So renal artery and renal vein. So, they're not going to be, blue and uh, red on the drawings. So that's them. Just think of them as coming into the hilum, right? Some people say the hilum, but I feel like hill needs, I don't know, it just feels long. Okay, the renal sinus or sinuses right here are these little kind of like open areas that you might see. I'm trying to find another good one. Yeah, so these open areas, right, in the collection components. Renal pelvis, let's see here. Pink. All right, pink. Okay, renal pelvis is going to be this area here that's going to connect like pretty much right into like where the calyces are. So it's kind of just like a larger, broader area for collecting, of course, like what's eventually going to become urine. And then the ureter, green, looks good. Okay, ureter brings everything out, right, out to the urinary bladder. So that's ureter there. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. It's very decorative. All right. Okay, so renal parenchyma is when the glandular tissue that is actually going to form the urine, and so we'll look at closer. So we'll look at actually the nephron, and that's going to be in there. It appears like C-shape in the frontal section, and it's going to be around, obviously, like the renal sinus or these openings. The renal sinuses, again, we looked at the cavity that's going to contain all of the things like the blood or the lymphatic vessels, all of the stuff, and the urine collecting structures, right? So a sinus, again, is like a great big open area, okay? And other than that, it's a lot of fat tissue that's going to be filling the remaining cavity. So the two zones of the renal parenchyma, or parenchyma, the outer cortex and the inner medulla. So remember, the outer part is always the cortex, just like in the brain, and then like the inner part, medulla, middle, right? For that. Okay, I need to get back to a pen. I am in highlighter mode. Okay, here we go. The renal columns we looked at, so these are extensions of the cortex that project inward towards the sinus, and they kind of like are going to be dividing the pyramids themselves, right? So that's kind of helpful. For the renal pyramids, you'll have between 6 to 10, and these are going to also be facing the sinus. So they're going to be, putting the urine back into that particular area, like that centrally located part of the kidney. The lobe of the kidney is one pyramid and it's overlaying cortices. So it's like if you had a pyramid, say here, it would be like, yeah, a lobe, right? You would dissect that bit out. The minor calyx and the major calyces, so these are going to be what's coming out, collecting the urine out of the, we talked about this is coming out of each one of the pyramids, and then as it gets bigger and joins with other minor calyces, it becomes more major calyces, right? So that's what that is. And the renal pelvis itself is formed when we kind of meet up and have like that big, broader space, right? And so we're going to eventually go out through the ureters there, and the ureters are tubes that are going to drain all the way down to the urinary bladder. Here's a little bit more. So this one talks about the blood supply. So the blood supply is this interesting thing. So you have these like large vessels that are coming in, the renal artery, all right, and the renal vein here. And so they kind of, they go up through the column area. Okay, so they're going up through these columns, and then they actually kind of do this thing where they spread around right between the medulla and the cortex. And the reason is because that's like the filtering point, and we'll get into that a little bit later. It's just important that you kind of like know that that's a very specific and intentional form, right? That this is how the circulation runs. Okay, all right. Okay, so that's it for now. And I hope that was helpful, and I hope all of you are out there somewhere having a great day. Bye bye.